Right, good morning everybody and welcome to the 8th episode of our Sharing Management Business and Personal Challenges from the Pandemic. I know a number of you come on every week and that's amazing, fantastic feedback, thank you. For those who are new, I will welcome and some of the things we say hopefully will find really helpful and interesting. So let's go. First of all, these are some of the issues that are being raised by what are now 750 plus registrants, and that's 400 organizations in now 15 countries. We welcomed Portugal yesterday, which is lovely. So what's the optimal role and style of the leader and leadership team? We spent a lot of time on that. Making sure that your people stay in a safe zone, preserving the firm's reputation while making tough decisions, winning work from new clients to sustain the workforce, maintaining team productivity, morale and well-being, continuity scenario planning as the lockdown eases, strategies for comms through novel channels, serving clients both here and in other countries in a social distance world. What about the financial management and also the managing of suppliers and the contracts? We heard about that last week. Cybersecurity outside the corporate firewall. And the two that I always think each week are really, really important, which is making sure that you ration your time to create space for real emergencies. Very easy to be very busy doing things that aren't super urgent. And remembering, getting everyone to realize that everyone needs downtime, including you as the leaders. So those are the issues that, looking across the various registrants, that we've covered, and we will keep on touching on all of them in every one of these programs. Last week, I introduced 7 strategies when facing a pandemic, thanks to a lady in Bratislava. We'll just go through those again because I think they're really helpful. So think big. As Lewis Carroll said, anyone can believe in 6 impossible things before breakfast. So, don't think that you are being constrained in the way that possibly you were. You are definitely the power of your connections, but remember that reciprocity is needed if you really do want to work well with people. Think small, focus on things that actually resonate with your key audiences. Do a series of not a one-off. That really does convert an audience into a community. Drop the convention and go for new ideas and services. And speed is of the essence. What you need to do is to articulate, and we're doing your assumptions, and we're going to be doing that today for all of us as a collective exercise, and then market test them. And if they prove invalid, and many will, how many new products don't make it to the supermarket shelves? Thousands and thousands. Amend them and then pivot in a new direction. And be entrepreneurial. Just keep listening and keep innovating, and that's really, really important too. And the key word there is listening. People think that innovation is all about doing things. Actually, it's about listening to the market and keeping that listening going at all times. And I'd like to thank Elena Kutsko of Globsec in Bratislava for those key insights. I think it's a really nice set of strategies. So who's on today's panel? And it's regulars, which is lovely. It's people who've all been on before. So welcome back, Meirion Jones. I think this is on his 4th occasion. Good morning, Meirion. Francesca Lagerberg, who has been with on everyone, and that's very much an anchor person, which is fantastic. Chris Blythe, as the former CEO of the Chartered Institute Building. Thank you, Chris, for coming back. And now that we're about to sort of looking vaguely at coming out of lockdown, with construction industry possibly being in the fore, to what extent are the political and the realities in alignment? Sasha was with us last week, the inclusive group, and had to leave early. So I thought let's have a bit more, because a lot of the questions were to her, which was great. And then of course, excuse me, yours truly. So that's kind of the lineup, and we'll be presenting in that order. Now, as many of you on the call will know already, we also do polls. And we had some really amazing feedback from government literally yesterday, saying your poll results are incredibly valuable in our analysis during these dynamic times. So if we're not just helping ourselves, we're also helping policymakers, then we really are helping the professions as a whole. And that's a really good place to be. So thank you for your poll contribution. What I thought I'd do is, though, because this week is slightly more of a catch up, and 8 weeks in, let's kind of understand, is to go through all the different polls that we've done. And I've just pulled out a few, I think, really interesting and relevant charts, which hopefully will help you kind of set the scene for today's conversation amongst the panel. So first of all, are we typical? And I think probably the answer is no. And I mean that in a positive way. We're pragmatists, possibly early adopters. Most professional firms are conservative by nature. And the way I can see that, is by looking at the extent to which our data from last week was different from the Be the Business data, which is a much bigger data set. And particularly in the area of pivoters, we're twice as more likely to pivot and far less likely to be hibernating. So that means that probably we're therefore the people who will be setting the agenda, because that is actually the way it works in life. We're expecting tough times. I mean, look, there's 6% in February. That was the Boris bounce days. 58% now expecting a contraction in the level of activity. I've never seen a shift like that in 3 months. It's completely strange. But we're still in firefighting mode. Most planning is only looking 3 months out, and about 9% only are looking beyond the year, which when you're talking about priorities altering and business models have definitely shifted, you can't look 3 months out in terms of changing your business model. That just doesn't work. And also client relationships, we think they're going to be changing pretty significantly, permanent, 43%. So what's happening? Well, yes, greater reliance on new technology is seen as critical to future competitiveness, but on the other hand, it's yet to translate into budgets, because what people think they should be spending and what's actually being spent is a bit different. Why is that? Well, it's really the wait and see, and obviously the funding and the current thing, because we as professions do like wait and see. Let's make sure the winners emerge. So what's happening? Well, the business model's being adversely affected in one particular big area, pursuit of new clients. I mean, those revenue model pursuit of clients, they just stand out massively in terms of that one. And why? Well, actually, because all firms need new clients. You'll lose some inevitably. Otherwise, you will contract. I mean, that's just mathematical. So what does that mean? Well, this means that we've lowered expectations of new workflow 55% compared with 4%. I mean, again, massive, massive shifts in 3 months. And also in headcount, for those who are watching, 55 plays 8. I mean, so we're looking at a really fundamental shift in expectations over the next year. Beyond that, who knows? I haven't asked those questions. So what might people do to acquire new clients? Well, some of the remedies, you can update the business plan, but as we just saw, planning horizon 6 months or less, that's not going to make much difference. You can develop new services. Yeah, the pragmatists prefer the pilots, the conservatives tend to wait and see. You can alter your business model, but here you have the innovators to level, what I call the baby in the bathwater. And it also usually means you need more new clients. So maybe that's going to be a challenge in itself. And finally, and most people, this is what the business schools would tell us, you increase your marketing budgets. Well, guess what? 2/3 of firms, they're reducing them. And here's how. Reduced by anything up to 50% for some people, but very few people literally below, very few people above the line, sort of 10% above increase. So there's some issues there. And then, of course, that then means, not surprisingly, if you're looking at who are furloughed and being furloughed, the marketing people are pretty close to the top. So that's a really quick run through all the various polls that we've done to date. And what I'd now like to do is to encourage you to complete today's poll, which for those of you who haven't done it before, it's anonymous. It will take you, I think, about 3 minutes. And what we're doing today is we're trying to do something a bit different. We're trying to say, here are a set of assumptions. To what extent do you agree with them? Because that way we're helping everybody building their new planning model. So I'll start the poll. Okay, let's see what we can see from this. There is, well, nobody disagrees on the first question about social distancing, and that's really, to me, the core assumption underlying a lot of everything else, because if that is the case, then social distancing is the policy intervention which is actually creating the problem. It's not actually the virus per se. It's the policy interventions that are creating the problems for people. So do we think that people will be discouraged from returning to the office? Again, nobody really disagrees, but there's a predominantly agree, some strongly agree. Do we think that post-lockdown people will be nervous about legal and reputational consequences? Again, strong agreement there. Do you think that post-lockdown face-to-face meetings will be discouraged and those more 10 people? Again, same comment applies. Post-lockdown novelty of working from home will subside. Again, pretty much we're getting agreement. Post-lockdown, new clients will constitute a major issue. That's more than half you and agreed. So yeah, there's looking here, safe place for leadership teams. So anyway, I think that's probably a good place to now sort of stop sharing, which I may, and I will pass the baton, if I may, back to Meirion.
Richard, thanks very much indeed, and good morning, everybody. I hope everyone is staying safe and sane, not necessarily in that order. My background is marketing and business development. I've got 30 years professional services experience on and off. So Richard has asked me to address that in the context of what he's just talked about, and in particular, the change of the business model that he was reflecting. So I just want to cover 3 points. And the 3 points collectively are kind of cri de coeur for the importance of business development and marketing as a core part of organizations' response to this crisis. The first thing is I've been coaching a partner. He and I were talking a couple of days ago. The coaching has ostensibly been about business development and business planning, his own and his team's. And he was effectively throwing his arms up in disgust and saying, what's the point of doing this? It's a waste of time. I have no idea what my clients want to do. They don't know. I have no idea if they're going to be my clients in 3 months or 6 months' time, either because they don't want to go with me, they don't need us, or they might not even exist. So it's completely bloody futile. And he went on like this for about 20, 25 minutes, at the end of which he paused and took a breath. And I said, so now how do you feel? And he said, you know what, I feel great, having had that opportunity just to get this off my chest, just to express how confused and frightened and angry and frustrated I feel. I said, terrific. Now let's change the positions. Imagine that a client was having this discussion with you. In other words, you were giving the client the opportunity to vent, to express how uncertain, frightened, frustrated, unhappy they felt. They would probably feel the same kind of sense of relief that they were being listened to, that they were being attended to, as you've just talked about. And he admitted it. But he also admitted that he doesn't really have conversations with clients at that level. My contention is now of all times, one of the key roles that business development can play is to encourage their partners, to coach their partners, to make the partners feel comfortable about doing so, but giving partners the practice, the familiarity, and the comfort of having these conversations. At the moment, no one knows anything in terms of long-term scenarios. So just having the opportunity to talk with clients, to build rapport, to be there for them, to listen to them, to be attentive to their concerns, I think is really powerful. And I think that's the first thing that business development can do. The second thing is in the new models that Richard was talking about. And new business models don't emerge out of nothing. They need a lot of groundwork. With so little time to do these things now, the business developers, the senior business developers, the people who understand the markets can help so well. They can help with segmentation strategy. They can help with the market testing that Richard was talking about. They can assist with new product development and innovation. They can help to plan the sales pipeline and the sales programs. They can help with the marketing communications efforts behind the new model. They can get client feedback. They can undertake client listening. All of these things are essential components to creating new business models. And if we're talking about a pivot, which in ordinary timeframes would be very, very fast, then I would argue that business development infrastructure, business development expertise and support will be critical to that. The third point I want to make is that in my view, business development should be the conscience of the client. The business development as a principle should be bringing clients' views from outside into the organization and using those views to change and to shift the culture. COVID-19 makes everyone a change agent. We are now all change leaders, but I would argue that business development, given its intrinsic role in change, should be at the vanguard of that. It's a kind of challenge I'm laying down perhaps to business development teams to ask themselves, do you see yourself as change agents? Do you see yourselves at this vanguard? Are you bringing these messages, possibly iconoclastic, possibly challenging, possibly uncomfortable to hear, but nonetheless critical in this period of fast change and crisis response? And if you're not, then I would say it's essential that you pivot to that role in order to justify your value existentially to the organizations for which you work. So to summarize, help your partners to listen closely, more deeply, more exploratorily than you've ever done. Help to drive the new model development at the center of that process and see yourself, business developers, as change agents in this crucial process. Richard, back to you.
Oh, thanks very much. And so again, my apologies for getting the last couple of questions incorrect, because we were hoping that would give us an insight as to where the area marketing people are currently focusing their efforts, and we think there may be a disconnect there. So we will come back to that next week, and hopefully we'll be able to then share that with you. So my apologies that I screwed up on that one. Thank you, Meirion. That was really quite a passionate, I think, appeal on behalf of marketing, and I'm sure that as we go through the call to today's program, we will find other elements emerging. But thank you for setting the scene in such a powerful way. Francesca, what would you like to share with us today?
Thank you, Richard, and good morning, everybody. Lovely to be back. Couple of things I wanted to pick up on the marketing workflow theme for today, and then a few small thoughts about what is about to come, because we're clearly all focusing on life after lockdown. Whatever happens in the UK is reflective of what's happening all around the world, different countries coming back on stream, some in very different ways. And how you manage that, how you do that in wherever you're situated is hugely top of mind at the moment. But the piece that comes out very strongly is this is absolutely a marathon. This is not a sprint. We aren't going to suddenly switch a tap back on, be it Sunday or next week or happened already, and everything go back to the world that it was. So how we position ourselves for whatever this, what tends to be called the new normal, but just what life's going to be, is massively important. So what do we learn from the last 6 months, the lead into this, what we've just experienced over the last few months themselves, and what was good, what was bad, what we need to learn from it. Hugely important for now. So let me just pick up on the marketing elements, which Meirion's spoken so strongly about. A lot of organisations have put their marketing team, if they have a marketing team, onto furlough or reduced hours. And you can really understand why often that happens in functions such as marketing. But smart firms haven't got rid of them or haven't said, we don't need that. They've kept some capacity there because it is going to be hugely important to be successful as you come through what's been happening around the world. But what you also have, of course, is marketing doesn't just happen in the marketing department. It's a function of your whole firm. So everybody who's in practice is marketing. They're marketing all the time. They're selling their business, they're selling their services, and they're selling themselves. So that buying into that commonality of what is it we stand for, what's our values, what is it that we're actually providing to the client? What is the client telling us we need to listen to? And what is the client telling us that we need to make sure we are fully cognizant of, and giving that independent, thoughtful, reflective advice that is both challenging, but also is reflective of the world that we're in today. So encouraging people to think beyond the narrow and look at the broader picture. Huge part of what professional service firms do. So I think there's a much broader spread here around marketing that isn't just around the core marketing budget, it's around how we sell our firms. And that's about brand, isn't it? Brand in its broad and beautiful glory, because brand is what we are, it's how we're viewed. So just two reflections of other crises that many of us had been through in the past. The firms that come out stronger are the firms that stay true to their values, the firms that actually treat their clients right, look after their clients in down times, and then they benefit from the up times. If you start suddenly changing the values that you'd be running your business by because of short-term cash issues and short-term problems, clients remember, clients move when they can, and it has a massive down impact. If you stop encouraging people to keep developing within your business, if you reduce your development in your people, you might not be able to recruit, but you can certainly keep developing your people, then you've got a real problem. You have gaps. Many firms will recall during the financial crisis, we lost a generation of people during that time because they weren't developed, didn't get the opportunities, and that had a massive impact on how businesses functioned afterwards. So last one from me, Richard, in terms of the marketing piece. Marketing is so much broader than just a function. It's all about how you actually are facing the market, what you really believe in, and intriguing to see that purpose and meaning really spiked around February and slightly reduced now, but core values of a business, they don't change. They're what the business really stands and falls by, and a huge part of how you are marketing your organization. Thank you, Richard.
Thanks very much, Francesca. I'll pass straight on, if I may, to Chris, who is, if you recall, the former chief executive of the Jutting Institute Building, and has very much a really good, deep inside knowledge of how the construction and world is, and its related professional services advisors, whether they're surveyors, architects, engineers, etc. And I'm really looking forward to your thoughts as we emerge from this strict lockdown period. Over to you, Chris.
Well, thank you, Richard, and good morning, everybody. I have to say, one of the first things that I really need to say is that the construction industry was never supposed to shut down. The government, in England at least, did not require the construction industry to close. In Scotland they did, and they banned all work except essential work. But here in England, it was supposed to be business as normal, but the industry shut down very rapidly after Boris's announcement in March. And then other bits started to close down as a consequence. So, for example, when suppliers started to shut down and so forth, it became impossible then to get materials. And gradually we've seen something like nearly 70% of the industry close down, even though they weren't supposed to do it. We're now slowly seeing the industry opening up again, but it will not be opening up at the rate and pace it was before. The shutdown is the worst it's been in 23 years. And it has a real impact. And what's not helped, of course, is there been mixed messages. The Construction Leadership Council, which is the construction industry's equivalent of the Professional and Business Services Council, has produced guidance for the industry. They're on version 3, which has confused people a bit. The aim really is to try and get people and firms back to work. But again, you know, in terms of some of the mixed messages, I'll just read a little bit from the guidance that I've got here, where it says this guidance is intended to introduce consistent measures on construction sites of all types and sizes in line with government's recommendations on social distancing, etc. PHE guidance for construction states where it's not possible to follow the social distancing guidelines in full in relation to a particular activity, you should consider whether that activity needs to continue for the site to continue to operate, and if so, take all the mitigating actions possible to reduce the risk of transmission. It doesn't say exactly stop there. The next line, though, says the health and safety requirements of any construction activity must not be compromised at this time. So if it can't be undertaken safely, it should not take place. Now, I could take the words construction activity away from that and apply it to anything that any of us do in our work. And that is, I think, you know, a key message I'd like to put out as we come out of lockdown, is that if you cannot continue an activity safely, you shouldn't do it. And it was interesting on the survey to see that people do fear the consequences, both reputational and legal, of people catching coronavirus at work. And I think that has been a substantial issue behind the construction industry's point, because these are reportable incidents and it comes under the health and safety. And, you know, quite frankly, you know, whatever the guidance you've followed, you as the employer will be responsible. So you really do need to take very carefully how you go around doing things after lockdown. And some of the guidance that's coming out is going to say hot desking shouldn't be done. You shouldn't have people working facing each other, canteens shut, and all sorts of things. So just reactivating business premises after the shutdown is not going to be easy. It's taken the construction industry the best part of 6 weeks to try and come up with ways to do it. And their productivity is going to be something in the region of about 50% of what it was before lockdown, before shutdown. So you can see how that's going to happen. So yeah, if you can continue to work from home, the advice will be continue to work from home. Don't be in a hurry to get people back into the workplace. And of course, if you're in the London area, of course, we have all the issues with Transport for London and their inability to deliver a safe transport service. So again, that's going to deter people. And I think one of the issues will be that the population is probably more reluctant to go back to work than I think the government hope we will be doing. So yes, there'll be all these workarounds taking place. I think at the end of the day, though, just as a general point, looking across the industry, there's a much more positive view about what the government has been doing to help the industry. I mean, a survey done at the start of the lockdown felt only 19% of people felt that the government was helpful. That's gone up to 46%. But on the other hand, I think people in the industry are less happy with what their employers are doing, and that's in terms of trying to deal with this well, and that's gone down from 51% to 40%. So, it's interesting to see how the perception that the government's help is helping, but of course the government's help will stop once lockdown ends, and we'll then really see the financial pressures coming on the industry. And I think the challenge there will be how we deal with cooperation and how we try and get rid of conflict, because the reality is projects are going to be late, going to be very late. You could put claims in for liquidated damages and all of that, but that could at the end of the day be something which means that your project becomes very late, because if your contractor is intent on trying to fight a claim for liquidated damages, they may go out of business, and instead of being 6 or 8 or 12 weeks late, you could be 2 or 3 years late. So I think professional advisors need to be very clued up to actually giving the advice that gives the result their client wants, not sort of some sort of go at getting vengeance or getting litigation going just for the sake of it, because at the end of the day, the aim is to get projects completed as effectively as possible and not make the problem worse. I think one of the challenges about innovation in construction is that it's a very, very lowly capitalized industry, and you can spend lots of money innovating and reduce your return on capital employed. So it's almost an incentive in the way the industry is structured to not innovate. And my big fear is that any developments that we may get and progress going forward from this recession, we will rubber back to the ways we've always operated in construction, which is dog eat dog. And that, to me, will be one of the saddest outcomes coming out of this crisis. Thank you, Richard.
Yeah, I'm a bit scared about your productivity being 50% of before, because A, that will slow projects down, B, it will make them financially far less viable for the contractor, and also there will be all sorts of other implications which we haven't even thought about. I mean, we haven't really covered productivity massively in this series yet, but I can see that as being, certainly at a societal level, a really big issue. As everybody is less productive, then the country is gonna, well, things are gonna happen a lot less quickly, put it that way. Anyway,
absolutely.
Thanks for that. Okay, right. I will now, if I may, pass you to Sasha, who this week is going to, I think, focus a little bit more on the role of the leader and helping people create a safe zone so that all your people are not in a place you wouldn't want them to be.
Okay, good morning, everybody. Nice to be back, and actually back for the duration. So thinking about this from a safe zones perspective, how do we ensure that people remain in the safe zone? And thinking about this from a leadership perspective, but also very much from a middle management perspective. So thinking about what is currently making people feel unsafe, totally nod to what Chris was saying around the commute to work. If we're going to be hearing on Sunday about some kind of phased return over a period of time, certainly we're hearing that a lot of people are feeling extremely anxious about even getting into work in the first place, and the hygiene factors around when they're in work, sharing pens, socially distancing, the signage, etc. And I think that from a practical perspective, what employers can be doing about that is making sure that they're complying with health and safety and doing assessments, and then delivering clear communications around that to ensure that people feel less unsafe. However, if we look at Richard's poll results from this morning, I think the common thought for all of our minds, and definitely our clients, is this is not happening anytime quickly, and we've got to really help people who are working from home cope with working from home, because some of the novelty factor about that has definitely worn off. We've seen a 250% rise in clients asking for help around boosting employee resilience. And with Mental Health Awareness Week kicking in on the 18th of May, there are lots of opportunities for organizations to start to talk about safety in terms of what does that feel like? What are the things that are making people feel unsafe? Anxiety about when this is going to end, but the practicalities. I'm always on video conferencing. There's Zoom burnout. What's that doing to me? A feeling of presenteeism from a digital perspective, an absolute nightmare in terms of managing home working, school working, caring responsibility, vulnerable people in my space. And the other thing that I think often is really affecting wellness and people feeling unsafe is the bleed, the fact that actually work is bleeding into everything, and there is no demarcation between when my day starts and when it ends. So a lot of what employers can do is help people understand, work out, how do we structure this new normal? How can I, as a leader, connect more with my team and understand that person A is going to have very different issues from person B. So what we really need as a solution is a new model of inclusive virtual leadership. Or what leaders are going to have to do is balance, when people do start to filter back to work and then those still at home, how do we focus on inclusion and getting people to collaborate in that instance? So empathy, humility, we talked last week about storytelling, really taking time to recognize the signs and symptoms of when people's resilience is failing, that ABC, appearance, A, B, behavior, C, communication. More training up of mental health first aiders, because employee assistance programs and sort of an intervention mental health week, yeah, it's good, but it's not enough. But really, I think it's a new model of inclusive leadership to really help managers connect with teams, connect with people, and recognize all of those distractions and the isolation and this new way of working. Some people are loving and thriving in this environment, and many people, I think, thought it was pretty good to begin with, and now are quite worried about how could I always continue to work from home? What do I need? What's going to happen to inclusion? So my sort of other point on this is that don't drop the ball on diversity and inclusion, because the people that will become less visible are people who are marginalized anyway. And if managers just respond to their affinity bias, I like people who are like me, you're only going to connect with people in your circle. So again, the new model really has to have a higher impotence on a focus on unconscious bias. And what we see with inclusive cultures, Francesca's point, people being authentic and having that purpose and value go through the organization, is inclusive cultures will drive resilience. So a growth mindset is got to be part of this as well. So we're really looking at a new model of leadership in this world that is going to focus on people who are feeling really struggling around resilience, around mental health, and connection. And I'll finally leave with that point that I think it's a mindset shift from not treat people how you want to be treated, but treat people how they want to be treated, which is all about connection, empathy, humility, and a cognizance of bias. Back to you, Richard.
Wow, thanks very, very much, Sasha. That's great. Mike, thank you for the question. I think probably I'll ask Meirion to respond to that one. If you can you see it? If you just read it out, Meirion, that would be great. And then your thoughts on it, that would be fantastic.
So just reading it out, for those who haven't seen, how many firms give a voice seat to marketing and BD on their management committees? Isn't the issue one of clarity of purpose, of calling of a professional services firm, and therefore the purposes of marketing, BD, and even of coaching in a firm? Yeah, absolutely. Francesca talked about the importance of ensuring alignment of values with everything that an organization does, and I think that's true. Branding is used a lot. Lots of organizations think of branding as their logo, their letterheading, the signage in their reception. Branding is first and foremost the behavior of the people in that organization and the experience that clients have via that behavior. So that question really talks about alignment, and I think that alignment has to permeate the organization from top to bottom and sideways. So to answer the question, I don't know how many organizations have marketing representatives on their management teams. Not as many as should is the answer to that question. I think that's partly because lots of organizations view business development and marketing as the comms end of branding. In other words, the brochures, the seminars, all the collateral that's produced, rather than something which goes to the heart of the organization and expresses it. Sasha talks about a mindset shift. I think institutionally, many organizations have got to make that mindset shift and realize that branding is ultimately what you feel, how you express yourself, and how you behave.
Thanks. Before I get the other panelists to reflect on that, if there are other questions, it's the Q&A little option at the bottom of your screen. Please share your thoughts. Francesca, where would you see the brand fitting into that
No,
conversation?
I echo a lot of what Meirion's just said there. I mean, I sit in our global leadership team for Grant Thornton, and we have someone on there who is, well, they look at marketing and communication, but really they're a brand expert, and brand in all its wonderful guises. You are your brand. If you can tarnish your brand very easily, it's a hugely important part of what you are, what you represent, your purpose, your values, a huge part of that. So I see a lot of organizations who have a person who fits that kind of capacity sitting in senior leadership. I think when the person is, and often it happens also with I'll call HR people, when they're just seen as a function that sits outside of the senior leadership team, I think you're missing a trick. Good organizations tend to have a lead who's a people and culture lead, and a lead who's around marketing, branding, communication. Huge value that they bring. And if it's not aligned to the core business, then it's not delivering the things the business needs. So I think to the question, it's hugely important to make sure they're not side functions that are seen as backroom. They are vital parts of how a business operates.
And you could argue, I think some people do that within management. Marketing is a core discipline, as is HR, as is finance, as is tech. I mean, and it's that bringing them all together which actually enables your board not to be too much of a groupthink context when everybody says, yeah, well, that sounds good. Chris, do you have any thoughts on this in terms of your industry or your broader role as an NED and how you manage these people on the boards that you sit on?
Well, I think in the professional services side in construction industry, I think business development is the business. It's all about business development. It's getting new deals, new projects through. And very often, you can't differentiate between the brand, the leader, and what's going on. And there's no surprise really when you look at some of the firms and or look at some of the buildings and you see, oh, that's a Foster's building, or that's a Rogers building, or a Haddad building. In those areas, the brand and the business development are integral to what's going on. So it's a bit different to where, in the financial services and what have you, accountancy, it may not be the same. It's very much more personalised in the construction professional services side. So yes, it's a bit different, I think, and the business development is probably at the boss level, managing director, chief executive, chairman level. So it's very high profile on the board. It's all about getting new deals through.
Sasha, have you got any thoughts on this topic?
Well, my feeling is it plays very much with what Francesca was saying around authenticity. I mean, if I think about some of the law firms that we work with do have marketing people on the board, and they're very much about, making sure that this travels all the way through authentically. I think that, that's just so important. And then from a BD perspective, just flipping it slightly, now is a really good time to be strengthening relationships with clients, because there's an obvious connect that we're all in the same storm, definitely not in the same boat, but same storm. So it's an opportunity to actually, get to know clients better. And I certainly think that we really, have much deeper relationships with our clients 8 weeks in than we did before, and we've been around for years. So I think that there is opportunity in all of this, absolutely, but it's got to be authentic rather than just box ticking. But yes, I mean, innovation and marketing and all of that sitting at the top but going all the way through is absolutely central.
The sort of the topic that kind of flows from that is this conversations around the business model. And I think if I recall from those polls, something like nearly 50% of respondents said that they were looking to alter their business model. And I think Meirion just said something along the lines of that's a really tough place to go. I'd be interested, Chris, you've probably seen organizations that have had to sort of change their business model, either professional associations, which I know you drove very successfully, or indeed some of the key firms. What are your thoughts on how people have approached changing business models and some of the obstacles that they've come up with?
Well, I think the ability to change your business model is very much driven by the context in which you're working. And certainly I know around professional associations as a whole, I think the danger there is that they get focused on just driving membership as opposed to what membership is about and what you can do as part as a professional body in terms of supporting your industry. And that was certainly one of the drivers I had when I was with the CIOB, was not to just say we're about putting qualified people together, but people who understood what the industry was about. So that's when we introduced, for example, things like modern slavery. We did a lot of work on corruption. You may be surprised to know that there is a lot of corruption in the construction industry, and a lot of tolerance of that. And what we wanted to do was to see how we could take that and try and drive it out. So you are working very much in the context of your industry, and so it's not easy to flip business models. That's what I say. It sounds easy to do, but it's not easy to flip business models.
Francesca, and you're sort of wearing your client hat for a minute. I appreciate you have a slightly different role now, but when you were leading the tax team for your organization or firm, did you find people who were trying to change their business model and struggling? Was that something?
Yeah, I can echo what Chris is saying there. It's I think it's quite intriguing, all the discussion around new normal, where the world's going to go, as though you could flip a coin and move on. And some things you can do in a very agile and swift way, working from home. So many organizations have shifted into this digital space relatively seamlessly. But the planning that enabled that to happen, that started years ago. Investing in digital workplaces, investing in good infrastructure, looking at cybersecurity. It wasn't something that happened in 2 days. So I think there is a whole piece around this as a marathon, not a sprint. You might need a sprint immediately to get you to the place you need to get to fast, but to build the infrastructure and the thinking around it, that takes quite a bit of time. I'm intrigued about how much people will just look to go back to the old days, and how much people will genuinely go, let's invest time in building something that really brings all the great stuff, throws away the stuff that hasn't worked over the last couple of weeks, because let's be honest, there's been some things over the last couple of weeks we so don't want to carry on doing. And then how do you use that? I just want to pick up something that I think Sasha referenced, and I love this term. I'm hearing this term all the time, digital presentism, just showing up on a Zoom call. I'm here, I'm busy, I'm working. Isn't it intriguing that some of the office-related things that people do, leaving their jacket on the chair, hanging around a little bit later than they need to, then get replicated into a digital world? Wouldn't it be wonderful if we actually just went, well, the real issue was people pretending to be something that they weren't. What do we really want people to do? The productivity, utilization, getting stuff done, but without some of the nonsense that sometimes comes around it. So lots to ponder, I think, Richard.
Yeah, and interestingly, the whole authentic is a very interesting area in its own right. I mean, there's a lady called Himani Ibarra, a professor at London Business School, and she wrote a great article called Fake It to Make It. In other words, when you are promoted to a new role, you feel a complete fraud. But at the same time, you can't possibly give that impression to the people you are now leading that you haven't a clue what you're doing. So how do you actually make that transition in a way that then you become an authentic leader? And the idea that somebody is born an authentic leader, well, we're all authentic people, but that doesn't mean to say you feel authentic in the role. So I think there's some quite interesting issues that people will be struggling with, and Sasha may have views on this, around authenticity and the extent to which you have to go through that transition. And many leaders at the moment will feel completely out of their depth, clueless almost, won't quite know what they're doing, but that's the last thing they want to give the impression in their corporate comms. Sasha, do you have some thoughts on that?
Yeah, I love the question, Richard. What I think is you're absolutely right. I mean, we all suffer from massive imposter syndrome. I mean, I worked for a bank for 20 years and was terrified every day that someone's going to find out I didn't have maths O level. So, imposter syndrome and, fear is everywhere. But one of the things I've learned in the last 8 weeks is actually how this huge working from home has changed company culture in so much that, senior leaders have, given a real human glimpse into how they are dealing with it. Those that actually are authentic have shared stories with the people that work for them about how tough they're finding it, what their big sort of Zoom blowout moment was. It's the humanization through storytelling that again gives us this new, and I know I'm banging on about it, but a new form of inclusive leadership, which is, some of that is vulnerability and humility. Now, totally take your point. Our comms need to be authentic, need to be clear, but they also need to make people feel safe by being honest. And I think a lot of people were very, very overwhelmed at the beginning of COVID by the information we were getting from everywhere about what this was. And most of us, I think, are now filtering our information source, but the trust of employers is really, really high because, you know, the consistency in the comms and the authenticity from most employers. But I still really passionately believe there's a real opportunity in storytelling, in connection, and by having our cameras on, we see that part of us that you wouldn't see in an office environment or on a construction site. We are more human, and that's something that can massively drive culture and inclusion. So I think out of all of this, there are a lot of huge opportunities and connections that will drive inclusion, that will then again enhance productivity and optimize people across the board.
Right. Thanks. We've probably got time for one more question, and this is actually Ian's put it into the chat. So if you want to quickly look at the chat, Sasha and others, talking about the impact of the physical office environment and the extent to which, if we are going to be in a virtual environment, working from home, to what extent will that impact the various D&I efforts that have been made to date? Do you have his thoughts on that, Sasha? And then we'll throw it open to others.
I think that working virtually means it's very easy for people to forget about D&I, but actually it's got to stay up there in terms of strategic imperatives because it's more important, and the lack of visibility. So, you know, I think you just got to look at these in a slightly more iterative process. And even if I have an office environment that's open plan, it doesn't necessarily mean I'm going to be inclusive, because inclusion is a choice. It's an absolute choice. We can have all the diversity efforts in the world, but that's completely different from inclusion. So we just have to work harder at what it means to be inclusive in a virtual world. And there are lots of different ideas about what that looks like. Some are very easy wins, some maybe take more effort. Over to other people. I don't want to hog the question.
Meirion, you've been sort of came up with some very eloquent defense of marketing, if that's the right word, at the beginning, and its contribution. We're now kind of in the last couple of minutes. Do you want to kind of reflect on where you think this conversation has taken us today? That would be really helpful.
Where has it taken us? Thank you very much, Richard, for asking a question which is impossible to answer. Where it's taken me is, first of all, to synthesize some of the comments, particularly the ones from Francesca and Sasha about authenticity. I think is probably my most important takeaway. It's very difficult to be authentic when you're separated by an Apple Mac screen, when you're separated by a fog of uncertainty and lack of clarity, when you don't know what the world is going to look like in 3 months' time, when you're continually having to mitigate the amygdala hijack in your head that wants to catastrophize, wants to tell you all the worst possible stories and outcomes that can happen, then you've got to multiply that by yourself and every other person in the world who's experiencing the same thing. So for me, there is a huge amount of fear. The fear is being compounded by the distancing. And I think that as professionals, as people who put great store by relationship development and relationship building, we are part of the ultimate solution to this. And that is to be authentic, to build stronger, closer relationships, to forget about our needs, to put those aside and instead focus compassionately and wholeheartedly and authentically on what others are feeling, put ourselves in their place and respond accordingly. If we can do that, I think that we are looking at a new business as usual. I think that we're looking at a whole new paradigm of interrelationships, both at a business level and a social level. And ultimately, that's my takeaway. I've been reflecting on this a lot. I do, to come back to the marketing business development side, I do feel that this gives marketers and business developers a wonderful opportunity to put themselves front and center in their organizations. But more than that, it gives organizations a huge opportunity to recast themselves as something purer and more authentic and true to their brands than they were.
Yeah, and staying with the values, I mean, clients was mentioned a number of times today, and I think what I'm seeing here is that actually we as a sector serve clients. I mean, our outcomes are client positive, happy outcomes, and that's why we don't like to put our head above the parapet generally as a sector. We like to make sure our clients are the ones who bask in the success that we've helped them achieve. And I think our role therefore in the UK is very much a symbiotic role with our clients, that we are there to help our clients, most of whom, if we know the UK's 80% services, are like themselves, addressing exactly the same management issues, exactly the same people issues as we are as organisations. So as a sector, we are pretty much, every organisation will have probably a lawyer, accountant, a professional advisor, public sector, private sector, doesn't really matter. So we have a very key role within society through our frontline advisors, through to actually engage with our clients and help them who are addressing all the same issues we've been talking about today. And I think that's something that I think all of us need to reflect on. So we can be very internally focused around management issues, but actually at the end of the day, you know, our role in life is to serve clients, I think. And if we do that well, then guess what? The money's in the bank. And if we don't, then we know there's a problem. So that's kind of my sort of quick thoughts. I'd like to thank the panel today for their sort of more of a wrap up. We've covered a lot of different topics today, focus on marketing, focus on authenticity. We've got a whole new set of people coming in next week, which is, well, not whole new, there's always some regulars. I don't want to put you all off. So if I may, I'll just quickly talk you out, because we're kind of coming into that magic time, and basically say that as you would be aware from previous situations, all the videos from these, not just the sharing challenges, but also the one on Wednesday, Hear from Experts, had a really fascinating presentation from Richard Thorby yesterday on his journey from being CEO to executive coach and what he learned along the way. Definitely worth looking at. And they're all available in the management library, which everybody on this call has access to, and it's a free resource, which is important. You can hear some more from Sasha on Wednesday. She's kindly agreed to come and talk us a little bit through how can you ensure that all your people remain in the safe zone. I think the key word in that sentence is all. Some people are easy. There was the guy who said in his bounce back, yes, well, I'm not in the office, brackets, my kitchen, because I've migrated on holiday to the Costa del sofa in my living room, which I thought was a really nice way of expressing it. So I don't think he needs much help, Sasha, but anyway, onwards and upwards. So do sign up for that. And for those of you who aren't familiar, they're two separate Zoom series, so you do need to sign up for it in order to enjoy the live video, but it's obviously available in the library anyway, if not. I just really wanted to share with you just some of the unprompted feedback. I mean, this is only because I think these things are just kind of humbling in many ways, particularly the last one, and I hope everybody will be going out tonight to clap the NHS workers. On which happy note, I hope you found today valuable. I'd like to again thank all the members of the panel. We'll be back next Friday. Today was a special, as you know. And please recommend your peers to sign up on the usual link, because we've got 750 people who've registered now, and we really want to get that to be an even bigger number. So thank you very much again to everybody and to you, and have a wonderful day and enjoy your long weekend. Bye for now.